Alyssa, thank you so much for your time and for joining me on 20 Minute Leaders.
It's
Uh,
my pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you very much. It's such a unique pleasure. You've done so much, and I'm gonna try to get as much out of you over these 20 minutes so I can learn as much as I can, and hopefully whoever is listening also gets to enjoy it. You went all the way from competing in gymnastics to being named by Inc. magazine's 30 coolest entrepreneurs, and now you're a CEO of a huge company in medicine, right? Not even everything is just shifting, and you wrote two books. One of them is coming out today on Amazon. Give me a very brief rundown of how you moved throughout your life, and then we can dive into some very specific things.
Well, thank you again for having me. Always support great Stanford entrepreneurs doing cool things like you're doing right now. And I think the answer is that careers don't need to be linear anymore. And my mother, who was actually a U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands
Oh,
under
wow.
President Obama, and she's an inspiration and a mentor of mine, of course, she gave a graduation speech at the Northwestern Weinberg College of Arts and Sciences, and she talked about how her own career was really circuitous. And if you had looked at it, if you had told her the 21-year-old version of her where she'd be in her 60s, she wouldn't have believed it. And I think that even though I'm 41, not 71 like she, I think that in many ways I'd say the same thing. I've been willing to both be opportunistic and take risks and take leaps, and realizing that based on my knowledge of my life as a childhood athlete, like you mentioned, as a childhood gymnast, which involved a lot of falling on your head or your bum or whatever you want to say, literally both, and you have to bounce back and keep going. I think that really, if you walk into a new opportunity with the mindset of I'm going to give this everything I have, hope I nail it, worst case scenario, I fall, I fail, I'm going to get back up and keep going. And if you walk in with that attitude versus the fear of failure, it's obviously a very entrepreneurial mindset, but it's also one that gives you permission to take risks and to take chances. And I think that's probably the theme that's punctuated most of my career decisions.
I love it, and I of course forgot to mention the sideline things like lecturing at Stanford and University of Chicago, but we'll put those aside right now. Talk to me about this new book that's coming out today, regarding very importantly what's happening around us.
Yeah, so I ended up writing a book last October that you mentioned, Leadership and Life Hacks, Insights from Mom, Wife, Entrepreneur, and Executive,
Yep.
and four books published it, and it hit the Amazon Leadership bestseller list in January, and I'm super proud of it. But as that was January of this year, as in 4 months ago. But what happened is, as we all know, in the last 6 weeks, COVID hit and
Yep.
COVID-19 hit, and some close friends and close colleagues would say to me in a text or an email or a WhatsApp or name that tune on social, so what are your hacks for the sheltering at home era, Alyssa? And I found myself writing a few one-offs here and there, and then observing some things we were doing at home that were working, and obviously observing things that we were doing at home that weren't working, and let those hit the cutting room floor. But in the end, it took a few weeks, but it made sense to distill this new set of recommendations for 19 hacks for leadership in the COVID-19 era and 19 hacks for sheltering at home. And that became a new mini book on Amazon that, as you said, launched today. Leadership and Life Hacks, ironically, I found out yesterday from Forbes Books, my publisher, that the rights of it are going to go to China. The irony of that, there's a Chinese publisher that might want to buy the rights. The irony of that coming out the same day that the hacks for the COVID-19 era came out is not lost on me, but it is what it is. We live in strange and complex times. But the reason I did the companion edition, although it's a booklet in many ways, not a full-blown book, is because it felt timely. It felt like there was interest and appetite. And again, to our earlier conversation, it's a risk. It's a risk to put yourself out there, especially on this topic. It's not exactly these aren't exactly easy times. On the other hand, I agree with Rahm Emanuel that never waste a good crisis. And there are things I've learned about leading this company of 200 frontline healthcare workers and in managing two little children, doing e-learning while running the company, while my husband's working from home and really busy with his work, while we also have a desire to have a strong marriage as we do. I mean, there's a lot you're managing right now. And if any of the school of hard knocks learning can be beneficial to anyone else, that's the whole reason to put it on paper. And a portion of the proceeds will be donated to COVID-19 relief efforts, as you
Really?
mentioned.
Wow.
Yeah.
Alyssa, that's incredible. Never waste a good crisis. Talk to me about that. Why, how do you not waste a good crisis? Hopefully this will end soon, but there's still here time to think about what's all rolling here.
So I think that, there are two reasons why you shouldn't waste a good crisis, quote unquote. And I do talk about this in the new book that, a crisis is an excuse for forming new habits and a new type of team bonding. So we're all, there's a very clever ad campaign out there, as you know, is that, together, all together alone, or alone all together.
Yep.
But really, what that means to me is we're all living in our isolated little lanes, and what can we do to virtually come together and still be a team and do team bonding things? And my team at Surgical Solutions, I ended up calling upon a very dear friend who's a trainer, athletic trainer to the stars, Abdul Silla. And I said, Abdul, since you're not going to be going to Wimbledon, since you're not going to be doing traveling you're doing for the next 4 months because of COVID, could I engage you on in the most friends and family rate of all times to do 4 virtual workouts with my team each week? And so we are coming together with you 4 times a week, 1 hour each, for a great workout with a superb human being, but we also have that shared experience. And that's been wonderful. I have to say, I've already had people say on my team, the 15 or so people who are doing it every other day, I've already said, can we continue this after? Or how could we do this after? And I said, well, see what his schedule is when travel picks up. And maybe it's not 4 times a week after, maybe it's 2. But I think that that's a perfect example of something we would have never done had this not happened.
Definitely. And what about as an entrepreneur? So one of the things we talked right before starting this show is that, this is an interesting time for entrepreneurs to accelerate their growth, not look at it as a devastating stop.
Yeah, well said. And I actually think that this opportunity, and I said this on a recent talk and taste I've been doing with a former Fox Business newscaster, Tracy Burns, who's a dear friend. I had said this a week ago, and I'll say it again today. I believe that entrepreneurs are in some ways better poised than multinationals to accelerate out of this crisis than ever. And I talk about this in the new book in terms of thinking and acting entrepreneurially. And what that means is, if you think about what you are as an entrepreneur, you are already starting from a stop, right? And now the whole world has stopped. So at some level, we're all at the same starting blocks if you're thinking about this as an Olympic 400-meter dash. Everyone's at the starting blocks. And when the gun goes off and it's time to run, the people who are the leanest and the hungriest will be able to accelerate the fastest out of this. Right. And by definition, as an entrepreneur, you're lean with limited resources and you're narrowly focused. And so if you think about that, in some ways, this was a great leveler.
Yeah.
And if you are clear in your purpose, particularly if your product market fit was benefited by COVID, I mean, that's even more obvious. But even if it wasn't, it's about clarity of purpose, clarity of vision, and execution. There's sort of no reason not to think that you as an entrepreneur aren't going to be well poised to succeed, because it's those specific traits of being lean and agile that give you speed. And that's what's going to be needed coming out of this thing. And I'm bullish on entrepreneurs right now. I'm super excited about seed stage investors and seed stage entrepreneurs right now. I think this is going to be a good year.
Interesting. But I do, obviously we have to take into account that only some of the entrepreneurs are going to reach that starting stage, right? So right now we're sort of in the pre-stage where unfortunately a lot of companies are closing down.
It's a hard time to raise capital. Let's just be honest. It's a hard time to raise capital. If you're trying to do it, you're going to have to bootstrap right now. And you're going to have to push out the raise. If you've already raised and you're being conservative with your cash, holding and then sprinting, that's important. And then there are people who are, I shouldn't say it's going to be a hard time to raise. If you're already at the starting blocks and you're moving, and COVID has been good for your product market fit, like a startup, full disclosure, I'm invested in, Maker Wines. It's a canned wine product. Well,
I love Maker. I just met them a few weeks ago at Stanford.
So fabulous. They were students of mine, and the business plan was written in my class at the business school.
Amazing.
Wine industry, and I'm super proud of all the work they're doing. And what's so great is that even though all the events were canceled at which they were using for launch strategies, they ended up with a whole bunch of corporate partners that wanted to have virtual tastings with their teams, and boom, the business is going. And I'm the one saying to them, okay, make more, raise more, put them in touch with a potential international partner. I mean, it's time in my mind for them to just gas pedal down.
I love it. Okay, talk to me a little bit about this engagement with Stanford and the business school, and a little bit about wine. How did you get into wine?
Wine was a hobby and a passion that ended up becoming a business plan when I was at Stanford Business School as a student myself from 03 to 05 that ended up having all the Stanford, pixie dust dusted on it, like a supply chain management class where I learned about a back-end third-party management logistics provider that could enable us to launch in 80% of the consumption market or with no inventory carrying costs and, and an independent study on taste mapping. I mean, that Stanford is one of the most extraordinary places on earth for entrepreneurship, as you know, and it is no doubt can be fully credited with my launch of my first company. Why wine is because it was a hobby and a passion, and it was really interesting from a regulatory standpoint and a consumer demographic standpoint. And our first business model was helping the next generation wine enthusiast get educated and entertained by wine, and helping boutique and estate suppliers on the long tail of supply get access to that demo. But why Stanford to teach is that two reasons. One, I firmly believe in the Buddhist saying that if you want to learn, teach. And so for me to step out of my day-to-day life and go 30,000 feet up and be, if not 100,000 feet up, and be reminded myself of some of these, fundamental truisms in business strategy, and think about an industry through the prisms of regulatory dynamics and marketing and go-to-market strategy and international economics and so on and so forth is really fun. And so it scratches my intellectual itch, but it's also fun to help inspire a next generation of entrepreneurs in a wide array of categories. And then when my husband and I moved back to Chicago 2.5 years ago, the former associate dean at the business school at Stanford, Madhav Rajan, is now the dean of Booth, and he kind of worked on me about teaching. And I told him if I did teach at Booth, I'd want it to be totally different. And he and I therefore took a couple of years to decide on what it would be. But I'm really proud of the class that is now it's in its third of 9 weeks. And the class, it's a new syllabus as well I created for Booth, and it's women as CEOs, investors, executives, and directors. So, the first week I had Christy Hefner, who's the former CEO of Playboy Enterprises, the longest tenured public company female CEO of our nation's history, and also a mentor. Yeah, and the next week was Valerie Jarrett, who's on many public company boards, is a Stanford alum, and she also is best known for being the senior advisor to President Obama for 8 years, longest serving advisor in the White House of all time, longest female serving White House advisor of all time. And this week we're doing a panel you'd love on women in venture capital, and so I've got 4 seed stage female VCs on a panel, and then we're pairing that with a Stanford Business School case on women in venture capital featuring Eileen Lee of Cowboy Ventures and Sydney Panos of Illuminate. So I'm not, last week's case was on Google gender and free speech and talking all about that, intense memo that came out all those years ago, and then a bunch of exits due to sexual harassment. And we're having tough conversations, and we're having them, of course, right now because of COVID-19 virtually. It's 3 hours on Zoom, but I'm really inspired by the conversation. I'm Amazing. Impressed by the women, 100 women on these Zooms. Wow. I'm grateful to the speakers, obviously, and it's an important conversation. And it's an important conversation to have in the Midwest, where obviously it's been on fire on the coast. I was at Stanford for 14 years, I know, but in Palo Alto for 14 years, I know. But I'm proud that we're having the conversation now, and it's been one that has actually surprisingly lended itself well to this digital era of teaching, because it's just been working. So it's been fun.
What's been your experience moving a 200 employees online?
Well, my for the class, 100 students online. For my employees, 180 of them are in the field, frontline hospital workers.
Wow. Okay.
We at Surgical Solutions provides minimally invasive surgical support services in 30 hospitals in 9 states. So we are on the front line. I've got half of my field employees and 40% of our revenue in New York City. So I am living this movie, and I'm not living it. I don't need to take credit for that. My people are living it. They are the ones providing the patient care. It's been extraordinary and humbling to watch their valor and courage and dedication. And I actually dedicated part of this new book to them as well, because what they've done here is just extraordinary.
Wow.
On the other hand, managing a corporate team of 25 through this virtually has been probably the easiest piece of it all, because we were already digitized. It's a relatively digitally savvy workforce. We're mostly in Chicago, but somewhat distributed, and it's fun. I mean, let's be honest. These are not the hardships that are happening in this era when people have to. It's a pain to do 7 hours of Zooms. It's not ideal, but it's completely doable. Whereas My people who are in the field, we had to, when there was the PPE crisis, we had to borrow from Peter to pay Paul to get more PPE to our people in New York City. And then we obviously have some team members who've, gotten COVID from working in the hospitals and dealing with that. And then obviously had to furlough some as our elective surgery volumes went down. And now we're starting to bring them back as the elective surgery volumes come back. So I'm living the undulations of this, as is my team, but it's been a great life experience in managing through a crisis. I am incredibly grateful for the dedication of everyone, corporate and in the team, and their steadfastness. And I think the one thing I've learned about it from a leadership standpoint, and I talk about this, is hack number one in this new mini book, over communicate, not under communicate. We have weekly town halls, multi times a week email updates. We're staying connected through those workouts, like I mentioned, for those who choose to participate. And I'm choosing to be direct, honest, and transparent, so people know where we are as a company. And we, thankfully, as a company, are going to be even stronger on the other side of this, because we will help our hospitals surge with volume, and that's a big value add to them. But we still have to get through it. And so just sharing with the team, all 200 of them on a town hall every couple of weeks, what we're doing to get through it, it instills confidence, because they know that I'm getting on the Zoom and looking them in the eye like we are right now and saying, here's what we're going to do to get through it, and here's what this looks like on the other side. And I'm proud of that. I mean, it's not hard to do, but you have to be intentional about it, and you have to be authentic, and you have to be honest. I mean, that goes without saying.
Incredible, incredible. Alyssa, I'd love to spend the last very few minutes talking a little bit about you, and I'm astounded by how much you get done and how many different things you're doing, from running a company to being a mother of two, a wife, writing books that are on Amazon named 30 Coolest Entrepreneurs, and lecturing and teaching a class at Booth. How do you do it all?
Well, I schedule everything. I really do schedule everything down to the 15-minute mark. And so that's the way to maximize time and time management. I'm just not, I schedule it all. And I am someone who, I do one thing for myself every day. I work out every day in the morning for an hour. My whole world would crumble if I didn't do that. It's for my psychological sanity as much as it is for anything else. And if I put on my own oxygen mask every day by giving myself that one thing a day for me, then I can give the 23 hours a day to everyone else.
I love
my husband, my children, my team, my students, my mentee, whatever. But I have to do that one thing for myself every day, and I'm unapologetic about it. It's a scheduled obligation, just like this was. It is not. It's immutable, and that's the one way I wake up feeling like, okay, I've done something for me. Now here we go. And in my first book, I talked about, in Leadership and Life Hacks, I talked about how you get through red eyes and sleeping well, eating cleanly and hydrating and all the stuff and working out plenty that we all know to be true. But for juggling, I think, which was the question you were asking, I schedule everything. And then the other thing I do is I believe in episodic versus daily balance. And that was an idea first kind of hinted at to me by Joel Peterson, chairman of the Hoover Institute at Stanford, my favorite teacher, professor at Stanford Business School, an icon and a mentor of mine. And it's this notion that I can't be everything to everyone every day. That would actually be daunting. But if I say I'm going to nail 2 stakeholders a day, I'm going to be a great CEO and a great mom today. I'm going to be a great wife and a great lecturer tomorrow. I'm going to be a great CEO and a great lecturer one day, and the other things are just going to get the barest minimum. I'm going to double down on being a great mom and a great wife. Whatever the 2 stakeholders are, I actually really do say to myself, okay, I'm not going to ignore my children or ignore my spouse, but I can't do everything every day and be everything to everyone every day. But if I widen the aperture of time and I say, okay, I'm going to be everything to everyone over 4 or 5 days or 6 or 7 days over a week, then it seems more achievable. Then I can spend hours of quality time with my children building Legos and have, wonderful one-on-one time with my husband and do all the work I need to do to make sure Surgical Solutions is pumping in the right direction and take time to be a thoughtful lecturer and reply and engage with my students. It's just can't get it all done at once. And so I think that's I actually wrote a recent article on Forbes about this about a couple weeks ago. I believe you can have it all, just not all at once.
I love it. I love it so much because I try to live by that myself, and it's a little contradictory to what a lot of people are observing from the sides, and it seems unhealthy to some. And I think it's amazing how every person interacts with it differently. I find that it's very helpful for myself, and I get so much inspiration from everything you're doing. Before you're going back to running the million things that you're doing. I want to know some words that you would describe yourself as, or if I would ask your children or your colleagues or your students, how would they describe Alyssa? Maybe give me two or three of them.
I'm sure my students would describe me as tough. My children would describe me as tough, maybe intense. No, I think my team would probably describe me as high energy and motivational. My I hope my family would describe me as loving and generous, although times tough. I hope my students describe me as intellectually curious and motivational. And I think that if I would love to have the greatest impact I could in this world. And I think you have to be tireless to do that. But I think it's a privilege to get up every day and be motivated to do lots of things, whether it's be a great board member or be a great mentee or be a great mentor. So I actually just subscribe to something that my husband and I both believe in. He was a pro athlete for 14 years. He knows this better than anyone. Just leave it all in the field. Give it all you've got until it's the ninth inning, third out, keep swinging. And then you've done everything you can do and you've given it all you had and with all of your best intentions. You will win some and you will lose some. And I have had my fair share of both. But you've at least given it all you've got, so you have no regrets.